I do not know how it works, but when someone deceives me or does not tell me something, I feel it. I would call it a guardian angel who protects from unfaithful spouses. I think everyone has this feeling. It's just that not everyone wants to know the terrible truth. But I decided to go all the way. I phoned Ed to ask if he wanted to grab a pint on Sunday afternoon. Of course, I'm already at the Wheat Sheaf, Bob. But I called you at your workplace. Yes, but I can redirect work calls to my mobile. That's clever. Maybe I should consider getting one. At the pub, Ed elaborated. I have to work one Sunday a month, but it's just to handle phone calls. So I got one of these new mobile phones, and I can forward office calls to it. Any customer who calls thinks I'm at the office. And if I can't answer their question from memory, I just tell them I'll get back to them on Monday. Tabby and I reside in a rented residence, but all the furnishings belong to us. If I receive a promotion next year, the plan is to purchase a house, tie the knot, and start a family. In the meantime, I diligently focus on my work, and my efforts are gaining recognition. Every week or so, I'm required to work at one of my company's smaller branches and spend the night in a hotel. The passion is always intense when I return home. We have a ritual for when I'm away. I call Tabby at her workplace once I've checked in to inform her of my safe arrival. I call again around 10:30, usually when we're preparing for bed. Those calls are more intimate. One Tuesday, it was in Bristol, and we were following our usual routine when I climbed into bed. "Bob, I knew it was you," she exclaimed. "How are you coping without me? Have you already used your hand?" "No," I replied. "I'm saving this for you. I'd rather make love to you twice tomorrow than once tonight on my own." And the next night I did it 3 times. Tabby was over the moon. Back at work, I submitted a report on Bristol, and I was called to Frank's office. "The manager at Bristol, Carl, was impressed with your performance, Bob. He inquired whether you would be interested in a permanent position there." "Really? He never mentioned it?" "No, he wanted to discuss it with me first, just in case I couldn't afford to let you go." "Are you interested?" "Absolutely." "All right, here's the situation. You were due for a promotion next spring anyway. However, you could secure the same opportunity there next month. I don't want to hold you back, but I also don't want to lose you. Knowing you're originally from the West Country, I thought you might be inclined to take it. I am. There's an added advantage. The person you would be replacing has already moved out, and Carl mentioned that there are 3 months remaining on their leased apartment. If you're interested, they're willing to reserve it for you. It could make your transition smoother until you settle in." "This sounds perfect, Frank." "Then it's settled. Give it 3 weeks. Afterwards, I drafted my resignation and spent a quiet afternoon. I chose not to disclose my decision to Tabby, suspecting she might be involved in an affair with a coworker. It may sound pragmatic, but I'm a logical thinker. That's what I'm paid for. I focused my attention on addressing the situation at hand. I was convinced that she had been deceiving me. There's a psychology behind dishonesty. The notion of, if you're going to lie, tell a big one is flawed. Someone engaged in deceit will blend their lies with elements of truth whenever possible. However, the name of the other person will occupy a significant place in their thoughts, prompting them to mention it. This tactic provides cover if the topic arises in conversation. They might say, "Oh, X. You remember X. I've mentioned him before." I mentally reviewed our recent conversations about Tabby's job and colleagues. Then I singled out the name she had mentioned most frequently, Charles. "Is he your boss?" I inquired. "No, Richard's my boss. But when we're seconded to a project, we switch from line managers to project managers. I report to Charles for everything related to the Omega project," she explained. There were further details. Charles had only been with the company for a few months. Other employees held Charles in high regard. Charles was divorced and lived alone. Additionally, Charles was being fast-tracked for a directorial position. Yet conspicuously absent were any descriptions of Charles's physical appearance. Sometimes, what you don't say can also be revealing. Perhaps Tabby wasn't involved in an extramarital affair, or if she was, it wasn't with a coworker. Nonetheless, despite these uncertainties, Charles remained my prime suspect. Should they be found guilty, my propensity for violence would ensure they both faced consequences. Despite my thorough investigation yielding no additional evidence, my latent vengeful tendencies simmered beneath the surface. The prospect of Tabby's infidelity threatened to unleash a torrent of bloodshed. However, prior to the situation escalating, I chose to give her the benefit of doubt and devised a test. Would you ever consider being unfaithful? It would enrage me if you were. What's prompting this question? She inquired. Will you answer honestly? Of course. No, I would never betray your trust. There's no specific reason for my inquiry. Sometimes it's reassuring to hear such affirmations. Are you suggesting that I might entertain such thoughts? I am not, I asserted. I'd end our relationship if you did. Following that tense exchange, we retreated from the conversation and avoided each other's company for an hour. A week later, I went to Coventry. It doesn't often happen for weeks in a row, Tabby said. They're really busy, honey. I may have to go on another trip next week. I haven't told her about the job at Bristol yet. It's going to be a secret for now. That night, from my hotel room, we completed our usual bedtime routine over the phone, and I added, I hope you're all comfortable in bed together. Not again. Of course, I'm alone in bed. Are you sure you don't want anything to eat? She asked when I returned the next evening. No, it's late. I just need to go to bed. I don't sleep well without you. In the bedroom, there were 2 cushions, propped up on their corners and leaning against the headboard. What's this? I inquired. It's modern. It looks sophisticated. She replied. While Tabby was brushing her teeth, I changed into my pajamas. Suddenly, as I finished brushing, I heard her scream. Hastening back to the bedroom, I found her perched on a chair, terrified. She resembled Tom's hefty black cat startled by Jerry. Spider! The duvet was pulled back on her side, revealing a large tarantula. I grabbed it, held it up to my face, and scolded, Naughty spider! Scaring poor Tabitha like that. Tossing it towards the bedroom door, it rebounded onto the floor, twitched once, then lay motionless. All sorted, babe. The hero's back. You jerk! She descended from the chair. You're aware of my aversion to spiders. Well, yeah, that was the intention of the prank. It wasn't amazing. Remove it. I grabbed it. Not hairy as expected, but made of rubber. Where should I place it? Toss it into the spare bedroom. And while you're there, go to bed. You're not sleeping with me tonight. I took the object downstairs and placed it in the kitchen garbage bin, wrapping it with newspaper beforehand. Then I went back to the bedroom. I refused to sleep in the other room. Hotel beds never give me a good night's sleep. Well, you're definitely not getting any intimacy. She was huddled into her pillow, holding on to one of her decorative cushions tightly. Fair enough. I'll make sure to keep any alone time discreet. Of course, I didn't engage in that activity, and during the night she cuddled up to me. In the morning, we expressed our love passionately. Afterward, while lying in each other's arms, she spoke. I'm sorry about last night. You really startled me. I apologize too. I picked it up at a joke shop while I was away. It was meant to be lighthearted. I wasn't completely taken aback by her morning announcement. We've been invited to a barbecue on Saturday. Oh, by whom? Could it be Charles? By Charles, she confirmed. He's invited everyone from the project along with a few neighbors. Since he doesn't know many people around here, it's a good opportunity for all of us to socialize. Well, let's go and give him a warm welcome then. Excellent. He also asked if we could each bring our own drinks. In the late afternoon, we assembled. Alongside a dozen familiar faces from the office, there were about half a dozen neighbors I hadn't met. I couldn't say if everyone received the same attentive treatment as Tabby and me, but he was eager to give us a tour of the house. The master bedroom intrigued me the most, with its carefully arranged cushions, a touch of sophistication we lacked with only 2 on our bed. Downstairs, Tabby mingled with her co-workers, while Charles and I retired to what he called his study, though it felt more like a library to me. The sight of golf clubs tucked away in a corner seemed out of place. You've got quite the collection of Stephen King's, I remarked, picking up The Stand. I've never seen this extended version before. As I reached for my reading glasses, he mentioned, many of them are first editions. I hesitated, about to return the book. No, go ahead, take a look. The valuable ones are all on the top shelf, some still in their original wrapping. Throughout the barbecue, I discreetly observed Tabby, but she betrayed nothing. She had brought along 2 chilled bottles of Pinot Grigio in a cooler, a choice I hadn't known her to make before. I, on the other hand, had packed 12 cans of Boddingtons in the same cooler, not anticipating to consume them all and willing to share. One of our neighbors had arrived with a liter bottle of the Macallan. I made a mental note to get better acquainted with him. I stood beside Charles, engaging in conversation. She's quite beautiful, isn't she? I remarked. Who? Tabby. Oh, yes, indeed, she's lovely. Lovely? I thought. That's a telltale sign. You're afraid to acknowledge her beauty in front of her husband. It's definitely you. He was casually attired in a polo shirt and jeans, and remarkably hairy. Unlike me, who had minimal underarm hair and none on my chest, his was protruding through his shirt, reminiscent of a large spider. I couldn't help but smile. Later, while Charles was occupied at the barbecue, I slipped into his kitchen. A tall cupboard revealed a dozen bottles of Pinot Grigio. Suddenly, he let out a yelp. It turned out he had left the barbecue fork with the handle hanging over the coals, and then grabbed it. One of the female neighbors escorted him into the kitchen. Her husband, the one fond of the Macallan, was asleep in a chair. I went over and joined him. Tabby rose from her seat and assumed the role of chef. Disregarding the hot fork, she confidently wielded a spatula, expertly flipping burgers and even rolling sausages with it. With a bun in one hand and a spatula in the other, she assembled burgers and placed them neatly on plates alongside the salad. Come and dig in, everyone. Customize your burgers to your liking with the condiments provided, she announced. We've got mustard, relish, the works. A casual line formed, prompting me to nudge my newfound companion. You seem settled. Would you like me to grab you a burger? I offered. Not just yet, thanks. I'll stick with another whiskey, he replied, reaching for the bottle, only for me to intercept. Here you go. Need some ice? I asked. I never dilute, Macallan, he insisted. Fair point. Care to join me for a drink? Thanks. I never thought you'd ask. As the injured soldier returned, his new nurse had bandaged his hand. That's quite a nasty burn, she exclaimed cheerfully. He seemed slightly embarrassed, while she appeared eager to comfort him. Eventually, she joined our group. Get up, you lazy thing, and fetch me a burger with plenty of salad, she commanded. Mr. Macallan sighed and winked at me. I discreetly observed Charles and Tabby until it was time to leave. There was no hint of intimacy between them. Rather, he flirted more with other women. To an outsider, there would be no evidence of an affair, but I had seen enough to be convinced. It was time to feign another engagement. The next day, I made an important announcement for my fiancée. Frank is sending me to York on Wednesday. 3 weeks in a row. Apologies, it's urgent. No worries. She was correct. It wasn't an issue. Not yet, at least. Essentially, I had taken a day off. Tuesday evening, I was packing when I realized something was missing. Have you seen my reading glasses, babe? No. Oh, no, I just remembered I last had them at Charles' place. I wore them while browsing through his books. Should I give him a call? She offered. No, it's all right. I need to buy more toothpaste anyway. I'll swing by and retrieve them. Tabby appeared uneasy. Bob, I wasn't expecting you. No, I'll bet Tabby called you. After that, I went to the suspect's house. Apologies for dropping by unannounced, Charles, but I believe I left my reading glasses in your library. Come on in. Would you like a beer? Thanks. We discovered my glasses beside the stand, exactly where I had left them. After sharing a beer, I requested to use his restroom. No problem. I recall its location from Saturday, he replied. As I used the facilities, I recollected his remark about rarely using the downstairs restroom. I cracked open the top section of the frosted glass window just slightly, unable to create an opening large enough for someone to pass through, even if fully opened. I mentally measured the distance from there to the main window handle. After flushing, we bid farewell. I made a mental note to purchase toothpaste on my way home. Tabby departed for work after our customary exchange of love yous and take cares. I threw in a be good, although she seemed to miss its significance. Instead of heading to the office, I drove to the neighboring town for some shopping. I found everything I needed at a thrift store, leisurely strolled around until lunchtime, and then returned to our town, where I purchased a couple of new shirts and ties. For lunch, I opted for KFC, conveniently close to Charles' residence. After my meal, I utilized their facilities and emerged in my second-hand attire, disguised in a nondescript jogging outfit, a cap, and inexpensive trainers. I strolled around to the street behind Charles' house and proceeded up the pathway toward his street. With my overnight bag still in hand, I scaled his 6-foot back fence and landed in the garden out of sight. Thankfully, the toilet window on the side of the house remained slightly ajar. It was fortunate because I hadn't really formulated an alternative plan. I retrieved my secret tool from my bag, a makeshift device consisting of a straightened coat hanger. Donning gloves, I proceeded to open a small window using the wire, which latched onto the handle of a larger window, allowing me entry. After securing both windows, I headed to the library, where I selected a golf club belonging to Charles. Though unfamiliar with the sport, I noted its weight and metal components. Next, I inspected Charles's bedroom, noting the arrangement of cushions on the floor, seemingly prepared for someone's arrival, possibly Tabby. One cushion positioned at the foot of the bed appeared possibly intended for biting. Returning to the library, I donned unfamiliar clothes and a balaclava, rendering myself unrecognizable in the mirror. Charles's car soon arrived, indicating their eagerness to commence their plans while the unsuspecting boyfriend was absent. Gripping the golf club tightly, I hoped to avoid immediate confrontation. I heard them opening a bottle in the kitchen. I love Pinot Grigio," Tabby exclaimed. "Me too, but what I really crave is right in front of me. I want it all right now. But don't stay too long. Bob can call at any moment and say that he has arrived." I waited until they closed the bedroom door, then tiptoed upstairs. I heard them undressing, and his words confirmed it. "You can keep your stockings on." I didn't even know she had a date. I hoped I had timed it right. Looking through the crack in the door, I saw exactly what I expected. Tabby was lying on the pillows, leaning over the edge of the bed, slightly raised. Following the instructions, she was wearing stockings. Her head was resting on the third pillow, and there was a mobile phone on the bed next to her. She was waiting for her devoted fiancé's call from a hotel in York. Charles stood and was clearly ready for the upcoming performance. It seemed like he was about to notice me. I got halfway to him before he turned around and asked, "What?" I didn't say anything. I wasn't in the mood to ask difficult questions. He partially stood up, his instrument pointed directly at me. In that brief moment, I found the sight rather offensive. I'm curious what comes to your mind in tense situations. What came to his mind was a baton. I swung it, and it hit him right between the eye and the ear. He staggered back and collapsed to the floor, eventually leaning against the dresser with his legs spread wide. There was a bit of red liquid visible, but it didn't pose a problem. Nothing got on me. Tabby was still oblivious to what was happening. I swung the baton once more at my fiancé's lover. There was an audible sound. He didn't say a word. He was probably unconscious. I let go of the baton. When Tabby started to turn towards me, I grabbed her by the waist and pushed her aside. I didn't intend to harm her. In fact, I'm not sure of my intentions, but fate intervened. She collapsed to the floor, landing next to him. They looked strange, sitting side by side. Upon closer inspection, it became obvious that she had hit her head on the wooden handle of the drawer. The blow wasn't too strong, just enough to disorient her. Her eyelids fluttered and she let out a moan. When she looked at me, her gaze was unfocused and dull. I squatted down and handed her the golf club. She instinctively accepted it and placed it on her lap. She closed her eyes again, apparently not fully aware of her surroundings. I stood up and watched them. They were lying side by side with their legs apart. Everything went better and faster than I expected. Since the lovers were disabled, I found over 200 pounds in Charles's wallet and took it all away. Then I took Tabby's cell phone and examined it. Despite the lack of familiarity, I understood the contacts function. Charles was the only contact person on the list. I realized that she had a separate phone to contact her lover. Going down the stairs, I took off my balaclava and gloves. A quick glance in the mirror confirmed that there was no blood on me. I went back to the toilet on the ground floor. If the following step failed, my only option would be to exit through the front door. I pushed open the primary window and made my way out, carefully adjusting the latch to ensure it stayed shut. This method had never let me down in my younger years. After removing the SIM card and battery from the phone, I disposed of them, along with the balaclava and gloves, into the canal. Inside KFC, I switched back into my regular attire, grabbed a coffee to take away, and headed home. A moving company delivered some packing boxes to my house. I waited until 5:30 before calling Tabby's workplace. Unfortunately, she had already left early. I then contacted her mother and her brother, but they hadn't seen her either. After another attempt to reach her office, I managed to get hold of someone from Charles's department, who confirmed that she had left early too. By 7, I was calling the local hospital. They informed me that they were just about to contact me. Tabitha Poulter had been admitted with a head wound. I hurried to the hospital where the police were already present. They wanted to speak with me, but allowed me to see her first. However, she had been sedated, so there wasn't much point. The officers then led me to a quiet area. "I'm D.S. Carter, and this is D.C. Burton," said the male officer, nodding towards the female. "We need to know your whereabouts today, Mr. Poulter. And I need to know what happened to my wife." The medical staff only provided vague details. "I'm sorry," replied D.C. Burton, "but we can't disclose any information at this stage. Listen, my wife and I are moving this weekend. I took the day off today to pack, then went to Collier's this afternoon to buy shirts for my new job in Bristol. After that, I had dinner at KFC before heading home. Have you ever visited Charles Diamond's residence?" "Yes, twice." "Can you disclose when and for what reason?" "No." They exchanged glances. "Why not?" "Because I'm unsure of your motives for asking. I'm under a lot of stress. My wife is unconscious, and her relatives are on their way. I believe the saying goes, a lot on my plate. And here you are prattling on about some guy I barely know. What happened to her?" "You need to understand." "No, I don't need to understand. Here's the deal. You share everything you know, and I'll reciprocate. If that means spending the night in a cell, so be it. My day can't get much worse." They exchanged glances, and he gave a nod. "A 9999 emergency call was received by the ambulance service tonight. They requested medical assistance at Charles Diamond's residence. We arrived and had to forcibly enter through the front door. He was discovered in his bedroom. Initially, the medics kept us out, so I lacked details on his injuries, but he was reportedly unconscious. Tabitha Poulter was also found in the bedroom near the bedside table, still clutching the phone." "What were they dressed in?" "Come on, you know exactly how this looks. What were they wearing?" He looked to the DC and she responded. "They were both unclothed, Mr. Poulter. I maintained a serious demeanor." "Did they offer any explanations?" "Mr. Diamond remains unconscious. Nurses mentioned your wife briefly mentioned seeing a black man in the room. However, there were no signs of forced entry." "Thank you. I understand you're not trained to provide opinions on their injuries. Share your thoughts and I'll provide further details." "Your wife has head injuries. As for Mr. Diamond, all I know is his condition is more severe than your wife's. Robbery might have been the motive." I paused briefly to process this fresh information. My spouse is employed at Wade's alongside Diamond. Last Saturday, we attended a barbecue at his residence where I observed some subtle flirtation. Later, I realized I had forgotten my reading glasses there and returned to retrieve them last night. Diamond and I shared a beer, and I stayed for approximately 30 minutes. Were those the only instances? Yes. They took notes. I found it astute, refraining from using his first name. After all, I was the aggrieved party. Clearly, it appears as though she was having an affair with him, I continued. I had no inkling aside from witnessing some innocent flirtation. My spouse knew I was off work today and mentioned she would be home a bit late. She was collaborating on a project with Diamond. Now it all makes sense. We circled the topic a few more times and eventually wound down. They rose to leave. I must request that you remain in the vicinity until our investigations are concluded. You likely have colleagues in Bristol. I am relocating there this weekend as I commence a new job on Monday. I can provide you with the new address. That will suffice. Please contact our Market Road station before you depart. A message will suffice if we are unavailable. At work, there wasn't much to occupy me except finishing my tasks and organizing my personal belongings. By Friday, I had almost everything packed up at home except for some laundry items and a towel. Fortunately, my boss had granted me the afternoon off. In Bristol, Carl had arranged for a colleague to be at my new address with the key to let the movers in. Anticipating some farewell drinks on my last day, I used some money from Charles to book a budget hotel nearby. By the time I arrived at work in a taxi, the movers had already loaded my belongings, including the bed, and departed. The house felt chilly and desolate, as empty houses often do. Tabby's parents came to collect her clothes and personal items. "Is this really necessary?" her mom asked. "Can't you two work things out?" I disregarded her and turned my attention to Tabby's father. "If your wife went off to another man's house to have intercourse with him, would you attempt to reconcile things, Dave?" "Well, really. There's no need for such vulgarity," her mother interjected. "That's exactly what I'll be informing Tabby. Just remove her belongings from here and refrain from visiting the hospital until after I've been there." The phone interrupted us. Tabby was regaining consciousness. Upon my arrival, the same two officers were present. "Would you like an update before your visit, Mr. Poulter?" "Sounds like a plan. I'm not in a hurry to see her." Mrs. Poulter's fingerprints were discovered on the golf club that injured Mr. Diamond. He's still unconscious, by the way. She remains confused about the events, but insists she doesn't recall touching it. Moreover, she still maintains that someone else was in the room, despite our evidence to the contrary. Initially, we theorized that he attacked her, and she defended herself, causing him to pass out. However, it doesn't quite add up. In fact, none of it does. Frankly, the presence of a third person would explain the scene we encountered, but the only scenario in which that makes sense is if someone was already inside Mr. Diamond's house when they arrived. And that would make me a prime suspect if I had the means to enter. But I wasn't aware of their affair until you practically informed me. Besides, I don't have much of an alibi. D.C. Burton hesitated before speaking, then refrained. I believe I understand her unspoken thought. Typically, innocent individuals lack solid alibis, she might have said. Listen, I'm relocating to Bristol today. Can you verify that it won't pose any issues? I don't intend to impede your inquiry, but this new job is crucial. Of course, proceed with your move. We're aware of your new address. However, we might need to interview you again. In the end, I managed to see Tabby, though she seemed quite drowsy. So, what have you been doing? She looked down, her demeanor somber. How much do you know? Oh no, we're not engaging in that game. It leaves too much room for further deception. Have I been lying? I would never cheat on you as a prime example. I'm aware you have. That qualifies as a falsehood in my eyes. Just assume I'm aware of everything and tell me the truth, every bit of it. She sighed resignedly. I had a relationship with Charles. Do you know what he's like? They didn't tell me. We'll discuss this later. Why did you get involved in this affair? I'm not really sure. He intrigued me. And what happened before you called an ambulance? I'm not really sure. We were going to make love and suddenly I heard him fall. Maybe he was pushed off me. Then I fell, or was thrown next to him. Why are you so insecure? I hit my head on the dresser handle. When I regained consciousness, I crawled to the phone by the bed and called for help, then lost consciousness again. But I'm sure there was a man in the room. He hit Charles, then me, although the police claim that no one was there. Do you know more? Yeah, I don't know much. Please tell me. I'm so confused. There's something you need to tell me first. And you have to either tell the truth, or I'll leave. I'll leave. Did you buy a mobile phone? Yes and no. Charles bought it for me. To communicate during your affair? Yes. Okay, I'll share what I know. But you're still a little out of your mind, so listen carefully. Good. I realized you were having an affair because I called Ed, and he redirected calls from his office to his mobile. I noticed a distinct pause and change in tone when the phone rang, indicating something suspicious. When I called you during my trip to Bristol, I noticed the same pattern. That led me to suspect you had acquired a mobile and were doing the same thing. The only reason I could think of for you to transfer calls from the house phone was if you weren't actually at home as you claimed. Then I noticed the cushions around our pillows, identical to those on Diamond's bed. The conclusion? You got the idea from there. How am I doing so far? She nodded sadly. When he burnt his hand and that woman took him inside, you took over cooking duties. We don't own a barbecue, yet you handled it effortlessly. You were flipping burgers like a pro. And when you first stepped in, you instinctively reached for the spatula without even looking. You've had barbecues in his garden before, haven't you? A few tears welled up. And you brought Pinot Grigio to that barbecue. First time we've ever purchased that. But it wasn't your first time drinking it, was it? No. Diamond has a whole cupboard of it, I checked. You're quite cunning. I'm obviously more cunning than you. But the highlight was the fake tarantula on your side of the bed. What was the point of that? Everything. You thought I placed it in the bed while you were brushing your teeth. But in reality, I had put it there the morning before I left for Coventry. What? I called you, heard the ringtone change, and said, I hope you're tucked up in bed alone. And you laughed. But you couldn't have been alone. There was a spider in it. So you must have been in someone else's bed, perhaps Diamond's. She sat motionless, tears streaming down her face. Finally, as soon as I left for York, you showed up again. Shortly after I left, you went to your lover to cheat on me and make me look like a cuckold. It's a pity that he got hurt before he had the opportunity to make love to you. Wait a minute. She tried to sit up straight. There's no way you could have known these details. You were in his bedroom, weren't you? You were that mysterious figure in black. I'm going to report this to the police. Don't be shy. The police report indicated that the location of the pillows suggested a certain pose. Your medical examination revealed signs of love activity, or, to be more precise, the prerequisites for this. They also confirmed that he did not communicate with you fully, at least not at that time. She leaned back. There is no evidence of anyone else in that house. I admit, the police are struggling to piece together a plausible scenario. But you were on the verge of becoming intimate, which led to an accident. And your partner suffered head and instrument injuries, apparently inflicted by his own golf club. The question is, who initiated the fight? Was it you? It definitely wasn't me. Otherwise, things would have taken a much darker turn. She glared at me, a mix of confusion and suspicion in her eyes. Diamond is still in critical condition, and your fingerprints are on the weapon, so go ahead and tell the cops you think it was me. They already think you're crazy. Tabby's cries grew louder. Another thing you should know. Our house is empty. Your belongings are at your mother's place. When you see her next, mind your manners. She doesn't appreciate vulgarity. Tabby appeared even more puzzled. I've returned the key to the landlord, so don't attempt to go back there. If you do, you'll be adding trespassing to your list of offenses. Also, I've secured a new job and a new address. You don't need to know where. What? You heard me. Life moved forward while you were entangled with Mr. Diamond. But be warned, I contacted your office yesterday. They were only aware that you both were injured. I informed them of your actions, and I doubt they'll be collecting money for flowers anymore. I'll be surprised if you still have a job once you're discharged. And as for Diamond, I doubt he'll ever leave that hospital bed. He's practically a vegetable. It suits him. You bastard. Coming from you, that's rich. If you struggled to find a job after you're released, you could always resort to selling yourself near the train station after 9 o'clock. The neck brace might deter some customers, but your skills should still be intact. I left feeling satisfied. The drive to Bristol was pleasant. Tabby would eventually discover my whereabouts, but hopefully she wouldn't bother trying to reach me. I just prayed she wouldn't contact Frank. How did I return from York so quickly, and we don't even have a branch there?
That's the end of the story. Write your opinion in the comments about this story. It will be interesting for us to read it. Also, do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel so as not to miss new, equally interesting and exciting stories. Good luck!